Welcome to the City of Louisville City Council meeting. I'm Dennis Maloner, Mayor Pro Tem. Our Mayor, Ashley Stolzman, is actually home with COVID, which we hope she recovers enough to be with us soon. So with that, I ask Deputy City Clerk Klein, please to make a roll call.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Dickinson.
Here.
Councilmember Fahey.
Here.
Councilmember Lay.
Here.
Councilmember Most.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Here.
Mayor Stolzman.
I ask you all to rise and do the Pledge of Allegiance with me, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Thank you. Item number 2 on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Do I have a discussion or a motion on the agenda? Councilor Fahey?
I move to approve the agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
Councilor Brown seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, next we'll have public comments on items not on the agenda and items that are on the consent agenda. And I have a few cards here for that. So the first is Richard R. And if you could help me pronounce your last name, that would be awesome.
It's pronounced Rykychuk. CZYK usually goes with check.
Check. Thank you for that clarification. If you could state your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes to tell us what you want to tell us.
Okay, my name is Richard Rykychuk. Our home was destroyed at 1037 Will Place. And what I wanted to talk about was before the year 2000, every memory in our lives was on film. What was lost in the fire was not just our home. We lost our past, our history, lost photos of our mother, father, brother, sisters. These life memories are gone, can never be recovered. The same can be said for my wife. Her parents' ashes lost in the fire, the family items passed down to her that belonged to her grandfather, one of the signatories of the Lithuanian Declaration of Independence of 1918, are lost forever. Like so many others within our wonderful community, we've lost things that truly cannot be replaced. Countless cherished memories, photo albums, family videos showing our children's first steps, first smiles, vacations, graduations, and so on. Many of us are at the mercy of a faceless insurance company, all while being told we're underinsured, and now to make matters unmanageable, we're having to navigate the complex process that do not take equity, being underprivileged or otherwise marginalized into consideration. Many of us who are very limited financially are faced with having to take out unplanned high-rate mortgages just to have a basic human right to a roof over our head. What I heard from the City Council is, those of you dealing with the difficulties of rebuilding, tough luck. You're just an ATM for us. But for those of you who are affluent and wealthy and who can build to the 2021 codes, it's a free ride. No use tax restrictions for you. You retirees, middle-class families that are trying to make homes in Louisville again, oh well. Because of the uncertainty and difficulty, there are many that will not rebuild. Other concerns of mistrust and retaliation if they confront the City Council. While the city as wonderful of Louisville must be able to collect taxes and promote a level of community-driven environmental consciousness, I implore and ask with the utmost degree of integrity to please consider putting money as a secondary issue, especially in collecting taxes from the less fortunate. I respectfully ask, on behalf of myself, as so many others within our wonderful community, to please take one more leap of faith on the underprivileged residents that live within our community. You have the power tonight to take empathy and community to the highest level of excellence. Please take this opportunity to show everyone here tonight how much Louisville cares about basic human rights, even about the immediate financial incentives and show people the value of the word community and what it means in our part, community. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Next up, we have Matt Cart. Did I say Matt? Mark, I'm sorry I called you Matt.
That's okay.
All right. It won't happen again.
So let me just do this. So hopefully, good evening, Mayor, Pro Tem, councillors, and staff, City Manager. My name is Mark Cathcart. I live at 1763 Sweet Clover Lane. I hope you've all had a chance to either read or listen to the public arts statement that I sent you over the weekend. If not, I'd like to encourage you to take time after tonight. I didn't come here tonight with, the attempt to actually convince you to change the budget, which is why I'm speaking now rather than before. Rather, instead, I thought I would give you some examples to illustrate the problem we have with art here. So first of all, this is the only gateway marquee sign we now have to Louisville. One of the challenges with art is it makes you think. I'm sure the gas station on the south side of Louisville is a great place. After all, there are hundreds of thousands of them. It must be. I understand we're also thinking of adding a second one this year or next year down in McCaslin. So yay for fossil fuels. The problem with this sign is, as clever or funny as someone thought it was, as far as art goes, the only thing it makes you think is they missed the U out. Right? So I'm hoping that some of you will remember that a long-time resident actually bought a proposal to the city for a historic marquee sign. Right? It went nowhere. It did nothing. It died in a mine shaft because of the lack of ownership, because of the lack of staff time and money. We should have better signs. How does this go forward? Page down, oh no. I guess there. Is it? Oh, I'm sorry about this. Oh. So you will have read, thank you, you will have read about the Kestrel Mural. This only went forward, I suspect most of you haven't seen it, this only went forward because I subsidised it. The Cultural Council nickel and dimed the art grants, which haven't risen at all in 4 years, I think. And the only way to get it done was for me to pay the difference. This is a two-part art installation by former Louisville artist Gregory Fields. I was told at the last meeting this was in the budget. I checked today, it's not. Right, so this is the second part. We've been battling this for 2 years. I mean, it's just not good enough.
So Mark, are you almost wrapped up?
Yeah, I have. I've got 2 more slides. Art is important. It has financial impacts way beyond the end result. It's both an economy in itself, right, which we've been losing since the Marshall Fire, and it is the art that makes the residents think. Ironically, I looked last week on Friday to see who was actually responsible for art at the city. And apparently, in no departments, we have nobody. Or in all departments, we have nobody. I'm sure this is a mistake, just like all the other art projects that fail. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark. Next up, we have Grace Gee. G.
Hi, it is G. Thank you. Grace G. My address is 1449 Adams Place in Louisville here. I am a Ward 1 resident and a member of the former EDI task force, and I'm speaking on behalf of Yannick Duke, Jojo Fulmer, and Ron Reeves, and I'd like to use all our time collectively.
Okay, that would give you 6 minutes.
Okay. The EDI task force came together to envision a better Louisville, and the city and city council seemed to share that vision. We put forth some recommendations last November with the hope that these recommendations would be implemented. Some tragedies have happened in this community since then that make these recommendations all the more important. These include complete an equity audit of infrastructure by neighborhood, census tracts showing lowest income and most diverse geographies, regional engagement with contiguous communities to assess EDI programming and examine shared services and resources, business incentive or grant award program for businesses with programming to advance equity and a more inclusive community. Thank you. Create a supplier diversity program for city expenditures for products or services if one does not exist. Create participation goals for minority and women-owned businesses. Create public awareness, transparency, and accountability around those goals. Set goals to diversify commissions, boards of trustees, and authorities, and compensate nonprofit and service organizations for referrals. Also assess culture and climate of committees to ensure they recognize the importance of EDI. Give each Louisville Commission, Board of Trustees, and authority an EDI directive to assess their work, deliverables, and impact through a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens. Set diversity recruiting goals for all boards, commissions, and authorities to ensure that the largest minority groups and marginalized communities are represented in the systems of the city government. This includes being mindful of intentionally creating inclusive cultures on each committee. It's not enough to have representation from BIPOC and other systematically oppressed communities. We must also create a culture that is not harmful and in which everyone can thrive. Lastly, but not inclusive of all the recommendations, have Spanish language and ASL interpretation at city council meetings as a standard practice. I understand that this is not on tonight's agenda. For a future meeting, we're requesting an update from the city manager to city council and to the public on the progress of EDI recommendations, as well as for the hiring of the EDI position. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have one card that's marked budget, and we'll get to that person when we get to the budget. Tanya, you filled out a card? Or is it, all you have on the subject was B? Is that for the budget, or is that a? Okay, great. I will mark that. Thank you very much. Okay, so the next item is the consent agenda. Is there any discussion or motions on the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
And Councilor Fahey seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to council informational comments on pertinent items not on the agenda, and Councilor Most is first.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring something to the council and the community's attention. There was a very interesting article that was in the CPR News this past week, and the article is entitled, "This Climate-Friendly House for Marshall Fire Victims Isn't a Luxury Home." Basically, there's a local builder that has worked with some of the folks in Superior, in the, what's the name of the, thank you, Councilmember Dix, in the Sagamore area, and created a, what I understand to be a fully net zero home of 2,600 square feet, which can be built after the Excel incentives for less than $550,000 at $211 a square foot. And I believe it's a 3-bedroom, 3-bath home with a 2-car garage. And I wanted to point this out because I think there's been so much concern in the community, rightly so. People have lost their homes and they've been traumatized. that people were not going to be able to afford to rebuild. And I just think this is an indication, and I know it seems like probably 26 lifetimes for the fire victims, but this is an indication that there are housing options available, that homes can be built to the highest standards. And they make a comment in this article that in the winter, the way these homes are designed, the sun and body heat in the home can actually keep it warm. So the costs of energy costs for a home like this are negligible. And so I just wanted to bring this to everyone's attention. I think that this is the first real solution, local solution, that I've seen come to the fore, but I do believe there's opportunities to do this with other builders in other places, including in Louisville. So just something that I think we should be thinking about and encouraging, and trying to find ways for folks in our community who are struggling to be connected to these kind of resources so they can rebuild their homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Most. I read that same report. I think it's very interesting, certainly from a sustainability perspective. Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I appreciate Councilmember Moses' comments. I just wanted to say that I appreciate the members of the EDI task force coming this evening, and I would be more than happy to support an item that would add to a future agenda an update on our efforts to implement the EDI task force recommendations. I think that was a really good idea, and I know we've made some progress and have been delayed because of other things, but I just want to thank them for coming this evening and voicing their concerns.
Thank you, Councilor Brown. Any other? Yes, Councilor Lay.
Yes, I would echo what Councilmember Brown just said. Thank you very much for coming forward, and not just Marquee, but all of you coming out in the middle of the rain today. And the directive idea is a really interesting one, and that may be something that we might want to work on too in specific, but because it's sort of overarching on a lot of those things. But thank you very much, and we will, I think probably we can manage to get that on the agenda. We really need to do it. And I appreciate your patience and the whole community's patience on it, given the other things we've had to do, because it's not to say that that's not important. It was important when we set forth the charge, and it's important to us now.
Thank you, Councilor Lay. Anybody else? All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is the city manager report. City Manager Jeff Durbin.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Just two quick items for you. The board and commission application process is open, so you can go to our website, refer people there to apply for those open positions that we have. November 10th is November 10th is the deadline for those applications. So look forward to seeing a lot of interest there. And then also the business forum, October 27th is the date. A save the date is in the process of going out. We've got a Ascent Church locked in, and we're really looking forward to a good event there. That's all I have, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we will go on to regular business. Start off first with proclamation for Louisville, Colorado Italian American Heritage Day. You know, this is something I'm honored to be able to read, so bear with me. I'm not an orator, but you know, I think that, you know, celebrating our cultures, and especially the cultures who created this wonderful city, is something that we should be doing. So the proclamation is, whereas on the second Sunday in August, the Louisville Society of Italian Americans celebrates La Festa to honor the achievements and contributions of the Italian immigrants and their descendants living in Louisville, Colorado. Whereas the contributions and legacy of Italians and Italian Americans play a vital role in making Louisville a vibrant and notable city that it is. And whereas it is fitting and appropriate to proclaim a permanent day to celebrate the contributions of the Italian community to our city. And the goal of this day is to invite the public to an annual La Festa Italiano de Louisville to celebrate the rich culture that Italians have brought to our city. And whereas such a commemoration will bring people of goodwill together to gain a greater appreciation for the roles by Italians and Italian Americans in shaping our city. And whereas such a day encouraging cultural awareness will contribute to vital understanding and mutual respect for the bonds that hold our society together. And whereas such an observance of Italian Heritage Day will be inclusive of all members of our community and reinform the importance of celebrating Louisville's mixture of cultural identities. Now, therefore, it to be ordered by the Louisville City Council that in tribute to Louisville's Italian community, past and present, that the second Sunday of August is hereby proclaimed in perpetuity Italian American Heritage Day in the city of Louisville, Colorado. Do I have a motion on this proclamation? Thank you. So it's moved by Councilor Lay
Second.
and seconded by Councilor Most. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll move on to ordinance number 1841, series 2022, an emergency ordinance exempting construction materials from city's use tax for building permits issued for the construction of homes damaged or destroyed in the Marshall Fire burn area. This is the first and final reading with a public hearing, and it will be adopted, if approved, as an emergency ordinance. I want to just, make a note on this. This is to do a first and final reading is an unusual situation. And what that means is that when City Council had discussion on this, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, I'm sure Planner Ritchie will correct me on that, but there was strong support for this direction. I think it was very clear that the City Council was looking forward to moving ahead, and any more discussion or delay didn't serve anybody's purpose. So with that, I will hand it over to Planner Ritchie.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council. I'm not going to go through this in great depth tonight. We've gone through this, as you said, a number of times before. We are here at your request as an emergency ordinance to approve the use tax credit. Again, what is use tax? Collected by the city at the time of permit for construction materials, replaces sales tax. Want to go through this one more time for you. So this is the structure of the ordinance that's before you. Again, available to property owners that owned the property at the time of the Marshall Fire. It also includes the provision for lot swaps. If they own any property in any jurisdiction that was destroyed as a result of Marshall Fire, they are eligible if they purchase a lot that had a home that was destroyed by the fire. We have sunsetted the program on December 31st, 2024. What that means is they need to have a complete building permits submitted on that date. So if they get their permit in on that date, they are eligible. We have two options for the credit amounts. If they come in under the 2021 with or without Appendix RC, they get 100% of their use tax paid. If they come in under the 2018, we've drafted it to essentially allow that 110% of the size of the home that was on the lot that is getting the new building permit. Again, we will require that the applicant verify insurance proceeds are not covering the use tax. This is due to underinsurance. And as we've noted, we are still collecting the Boulder County use tax. They have a separate rebate program. Budget assumptions, because we have kind of narrowed the gap here between the 2021 and the 2018 code, and we've added that additional 10%, I think for the finance director recommends that we just assume 100% of use taxes are going to be credited back. In reality, I think there will be less than that for lots that have sold and things like that, but for budget purposes, that's the assumption that they've included. I don't have this in the slide, but I just want to let for folks know listening, our intention is to publish information on Friday in the kind of the Friday communication for all the residents on how, if they've already submitted a permit, what they need to do to request their use tax credit, or if they haven't submitted it yet, how they can go about this, and that we are hoping for a 15 to 30 day timeline to get checks in the mail for folks. Happy to answer any questions.
Any technical questions before we go into public comment? Yes, Councilor Mose?
I just want to ask a question. Are the permitting fees and use tax fees and all of that process, are those public records?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll go into public comment. Tanya S., you're the first one up.
Hello, Council. I'm Tanya Samaru, 944 Larkspur Lane, fire survivor. I just want to say it means a lot to fire survivors emotionally to have gotten to this point. It was so invalidating. It's so invalidating to think that everybody has to pay a tremendous use tax to rebuild their homes in Louisville, and that Louisville is going to, just end up with all this extra money they didn't account for. It feels like the fact that this ordinance is up for a vote, it feels like we've been heard. It feels really good. I hope, Superior's passed use tax relief. Boulder County has. We're talking to RTD. I hope the state will look at it. I hope that we won't be the only people who get use tax rebate after a disaster in Colorado. I hope this is a trend that will be, I hope that we're getting the ball rolling for momentum for, with climate change being upon us, as disasters come up, people will hopefully be able to recover quicker. As we all know, the Marshall fire survivors have a tremendous community foundation fund, and a lot of people will be receiving $20,000 to $30,000. I'm really pleased that a large fraction of that for people is not going to be going to use tax. I just want to say, I hope you vote yes. It's the right thing to do, and this is what disaster recovery should look like, and being connected to your community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We have one call on Zoom, and it's Wanda. Are you there, Wanda?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome.
I was reading the information. I really appreciate you guys thinking about giving us back or rebating the use tax. One concern I have is I'm underfunded. I'll be using my bank money, which is tax paid money, to pay whatever use tax I need. On my initial reading with the information on the city, I would then be getting a 1099 for a rebate on the use tax, which means I'm using tax paid money to pay the use tax, and then I'm going to have to turn around and pay money tax again for the same thing because you're going to give me a 1099. Yeah, I really wish that there was some way to alleviate that and not have a 1099 so that I'm not paying twice on money. But I really appreciate getting the use tax back if that is going to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Wanda. All right, there were no other public comments, but I see Councilor Brown's hand up very quickly. Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I appreciate that. I just wanted to ask staff, in relation to the last commenter's comment, I thought that we had created a credit program that got around this 1099 issue. Is that what's in front of us tonight?
The city will not be issuing 1099s with the associated credit. I mean, their final tax implications, folks should understand that, but we won't be issuing 1099s.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just for a little more clarification, thank you for asking staff for clarification. That was an earlier iteration of that where we were looking for a lot more information and then a taxable 1099. What we're doing, what we're proposing with this is a credit. So you're not paying that and then getting a rebate. So it is a credit at the time you apply for the building permit, which I'm very happy we reached that point. Other comments before we take, yes, Councilor Dickinson.
Yeah, I think this is, I'm really happy that we've gotten here. I know, a lot of people have, it's been a long process, and I know that just that alone is a difficult part of this whole story, is the time it takes to get this done. And I know people wish we had just kind of snapped our fingers and got it done. And I think we have been dealing with a lot of uncertainty for a long period of time, and we continue to face that. So I'm really happy with the product that we've created. And I do think that, we'll have a budget conversation later on this evening and then in the future. And I think it's important that as a community, we keep thinking about ways to, I think one of the things that we heard is the fire survivors shouldn't be the ones funding the rebuild of the city and the roads and the sidewalks and all these things that we have to do. But I think what that means is that the whole city needs to do that So I do think we need to continue to have a conversation about a fire recovery tax or a fire recovery bond or something, really thinking about putting the weight on the entire community to fund any shortfalls that we end up having and not just on the fire victims, right? And so that isn't a conversation for this evening, but I think that's a really important part of this is that there is a fiscal impact to doing this because there is a lot of money we need to spend on the recovery, but I think we've made it really clear that, yes, we are not going to put that on from a revenue stream from the rebuild, but we might still need to find another revenue stream. So I hope that we can continue to work together as a community and look how we can share that burden equally, or maybe not equally, but equitably, so that we can have the things that we want and the staff that we want and the priorities that we want. So just keep that on your radar moving forward that we might need to have that conversation. But I really like what we've come with tonight.
Thank you, Councilor Dickinson. Councilor Fahey.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I will add my thanks to the staff in particular, also to my fellow council members. As someone who did lose their home in the fire, I have been recusing myself from all of the discussions on recovery, and I am proud and pleased and impressed with what a wonderful, compassionate feeling we've been getting in the response from council. And the assistance from staff has just been amazing. So thank you all, and I will be voting for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Fahey. Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you for, I just want to thank everyone, all of my colleagues here. I know this has been a long road, and we've been talking about this for many months. I want to thank the fire, those who lost their homes, for continuing to advocate on behalf of the community, for letting us know what is needed and necessary. I think that's been a really important dialogue, and I have really appreciated the many conversations I've had with so many folks who've lost their homes about this particular issue. I think it's been an incredibly difficult issue for us to deal with as council and at the staff level, but I think thanks to some creative thinking on behalf of our staff, our attorneys, and a real open mind and the ability for us to kind of to work together on this dais, I think we've come up with a really good solution. So I would just want to thank everybody who's been involved, and I feel like the community is going to be better for this particular ordinance. So thanks again, and I'll be adding my support.
Thank you, Councilor Brown. All right, I think we're going to go back for our last round of additional public comments. Does anybody on Zoom or anybody in the room have any additional comments? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask my colleagues if they are comfortable with me closing the public hearing at this point. Do you have any other questions for staff? Okay, we're closing a public hearing, and I'm going to take my opportunity to make a few comments. Like Councilor Brown, I think that, and Councilor Dickinson mentioned as well, I think what we've come up with is the very best solution to this. And, we talked about, and it was brought up in public comments about 1099s and W-2s and all those kind of things. And I think that our finance director, who's probably on the call, but certainly other staff and, Planner Ritchie and others, I'm going to miss names if I try to, mention everybody's name, who actually coalesced around a very, very good solution. And some of the public comments we heard about, because of the energy issues and sustainability, houses might need to be a little bigger. We heard that. You saw us make changes at the last meeting. So I think we collectively, we don't always agree on things, but I think that we have very good support on this one, and it's something we worked on hard. It's taken longer than anyone would have liked, but I think the outcome is an outcome that works for everyone. So with that, any other comments or motions or anything? Councilor Lay?
I guess just a couple of comments. One, I also thank the staff and the council for their hard work on this, but the survivors have kept feet to the fire and provided some ideas. And all of those things are what we kind of almost, we sort of expect that from people in Louisville. I'm not sure we should have needed as much of it as we got, but I'm glad we got it, and I'm glad we've gotten to today. And, one thing, and I don't want to defend the length of time, because I know it has been an enormous amount of time. I know that. So I'm not, the one thing I would say is that I think one of the reasons that we're able, or we're really able to do this financially, part of the reason is that in the past, and even among the people who are here on the dais, I think we've been careful about the finances of the city. I don't think that's a reason for the delay. What I would say is I think it helps us make the decisions that we're making, and it gives us the funds, I think, part of the funding to be able to do it. So that's good. And if we had promised you, for example, right away that we're not going to collect use taxes from anybody, that would have been just, it would have been a hollow kind of thing, because if you don't collect use tax, you just give it up to some other community. But we've got a method of doing it that gives you all relief and that keeps us to the other obligations. But I guess, and this is just from me personally, but I'm sorry for the additional aggravation of the trauma that you felt in the meantime, because I know it's taken a long time. And I know you didn't believe through the whole process we were going to come up with something. There were times when it was like, they're not going to go there. And thanks for working on us, and thanks, to the members of council for having good debates, and the staff for being very, very supportive and helpful. So thanks. And I guess what I'd like to do is to, if it's time for a motion, I'm ready to make a motion. Okay, I'd move the passage of ordinance number 1841, series 2022, an emergency ordinance exempting construction materials from the city's use tax for building permits issued for reconstruction of homes damaged or destroyed in Marshall Fire Burn Area. First and final reading.
Council Brown, thank you.
That was really loud, sorry.
I saw it coming. Councilor Dickinson.
Just because once we're done, we're not really supposed to talk about it anymore. I just wanted to remind you all that if and when this passes, you're not supposed to pay sales tax. So really be cognizant of that. And when you're buying materials and your contractor's buying materials and you're doing those things, don't also pay sales tax after you got the use tax waived. So bringing your permit and showing that you've paid your use tax and got it credited back, that's an important part of this process. We wouldn't want to do all of this and then have you still pay sales tax when you're buying things like lumber from Kentucky. You don't have to pay sales tax on that. So just make sure you're working with our city if you need help on those details. But I think that's an important piece of this puzzle.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so what Councilor Dickinson is talking about is not paying Louisville city tax, because you will still pay state sales tax wherever those materials are purchased. So it's a little complicated, but absolutely, and that's something our building planning department deals with all the time, is people are paying use tax and then sales tax, and they shouldn't be paying both. So any other comments? Are we ready for a roll call? Can we have a roll call? Deputy City Clerk Klein?
Councilmember Most,
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey,
Yes.
Councilmember Lay.
Yes.
Thank you. So the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next item, ordinance, C, and this is really a companion piece. This is us syncing up what we just passed was what we did earlier with the energy codes, because we want to make sure they're completely in sync. So this is more of a housekeeping, but we will go through this process. So ordinance number 1842, series 2022, an emergency ordinance amending chapter 15 of the Louisville Municipal Code to expand the availability of a 2018 International Energy Conservation Code as an alternative for rebuilding of structures significantly damaged or destroyed by marshal fire, first and final reading. So this is an item that we have strong support on, and that's why we're doing first and final reading. And so, Planner Ritchie.
I don't have a presentation for you tonight. I'm just here to answer any questions. It's the same concept. If they lost a home that was destroyed on any jurisdiction and they buy a lot in Lewisville, they are eligible for all of those same benefits. So happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any technical questions on that short and perfect presentation? All right, thank you. So we will move on to public comments. Is there anybody on Zoom or anybody in the room has public comments on this one? Seeing none, we will go to the first round of council questions and comments. Councilor, are you pointing or raising? Well, Councilor Most, please.
Thank you. I just appreciate staff working on this and my fellow council members considering this. Someone had reached out to me months ago, actually an individual from Superior who said she wanted to move to Louisville and she had lost her home. And so I was like, well, that seems like a reasonable thing to do. So I just appreciate everyone kind of going, yeah, of course, that makes sense. So thanks, everybody.
Councilor Fahey.
I will add my thanks also to council and to staff for coming up with this. I also had conversations with people who wanted to build on a different lot, not wanting to try to rebuild their lost house on their lost property because of the trauma that it might cause moving in. And so I thank them and I thank you for coming up with this solution. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councilor Fahey. With that, we'll move on to the second round of additional public comments. Does anybody in the room or anybody on Zoom have comments? Not seeing any. We will move on to the final comments by council. Are you going to make a motion? Well, let me close the public hearing and Councilor Brown.
I'll defer to Councilmember.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'd like to make a motion. Yeah, okay. Ordinance number 1842, series 2022, an emergency ordinance amending chapter 15 of the Louisville Municipal Code to expand the availability of 2018 International Energy Conservation Code as an alternative for rebuilding of structures significantly damaged or destroyed by marshal fire, first and final reading.
Thank you. Councilor Lay, you are next up.
Second.
Did I get? I think I hit 2 seconds over here. I'll let the.
I just had a comment, and I wanted to especially thank Councilmember Most for bringing this forward, because she actually was the initial commenter that brought it all together, so thank you.
Any other comments? I guess we're ready for a roll call vote. Thank you.
Councilmember Most,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Lay,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney,
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson,
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everybody. The next agenda item is agenda item D, discussion and direction. City manager proposed 2023-2024 operating and capital budget, 2023 through 2028 capital improvements plan, and the 2023 through 2028 long-term financial plan. City Manager Jeff Durbin.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Would you like me to stand up at the podium? 'Cause I know you.
I like you standing up. But no, let's not do that.
I'm going to be brief tonight. at the last meeting on the 20th, there was a PowerPoint presentation I walked through. That's available in the packet if anybody wants to catch up from the last meeting. But just want to reinforce a couple things. One, the city is in a very different financial position today than it was a year ago, and we've taken that into account with our drafting of the proposed budget. The budget priorities, in addition to maintaining projects and programs, staffing levels and revenue projections, budget priorities, there's 3 of them: Marshall Fire recovery, maintaining essential operations and assets, and establishing a sustainable budget future. We're still working through, like a lot of our families, working through insurance and reimbursement with FEMA. We still have a ways to go in terms of where the city's position is going to end up with all these capital projects that we need. So we're recommending that we're conservative on those type of things, but we certainly are open to your suggestions and thoughts. Last thing, the schedule as we go out. We're here on October 3rd for a city council discussion and direction. October 18th, we have a public hearing scheduled. October 25th, one more round with city council, and we anticipate adoption on November 15th. Happy to take any questions. I wanted to be brief because it's our turn to hear from you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take public comments, and then we'll spend the rest of the time with council comments. So I have one sign up. I don't see it on Zoom yet, but JR, you know it's you. So unfortunately, I can't read your last name, so all right.
Tim. Now I've got this. Anyway, I want to thank City Council. I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem for all the efforts you guys put in this. I know we're going through a difficult time right now, but I do have a few things that I would like to ask. And so my name, J.R. Kettleson, 539 West Laurel Court. I'm also a member of the Louisville Cultural Council. And tonight I'm here as a member of the council and as a citizen. I know we've talked tonight about the Marshall Fire, and I know that that still weighs heavy on our conscience. And I know that the aftermath of that weighs heavy on us, and the rebuilding is going to take time. I joined the LCC because I believe the arts, a vibrant and diverse arts community, is absolutely a vital component to a vibrant and successful community, along with local businesses, along with city amenities like libraries and the rec center and the open space we have and parks that we have. I believe that the arts are really critical and that we need to support them. So we talk a lot about it. We've already had somebody talk tonight about supporting the arts. We talk a lot about it, but let me tell you a little bit about what we do on the LCC. So far in 2022, we sponsored the 5 summer concerts at Community Park. And so when we sponsor that, we find the talent, we negotiate pay for those, the main acts, the opening acts, we coordinate the food trucks that come in, we set up, we take down, we bring in the professional sound, we coordinate all of that and help negotiate those prices based on what budget we have. The other things we've done, we do the Louisville Art Grants every year. This year we reviewed about 20 of those, and we ended up selecting 11 people that received grants, and they will be performing throughout the city. They'll be doing performance art, they'll be doing visual arts, and I hope you guys have been able to go to some of them, like the concert we had at the fire station back in June. We sponsored 7 events at the Louisville Center for the Arts. One of those was from last year, so really we only sponsored 6, and we had to cut back from what we wanted to do because our budget wouldn't allow it. So those were diverse. It was opera, it was bluegrass, it was a Mayan healing ceremony, flower healing ceremony. It was a wonderful group. It was all were very well attended. We're also right now working on a call for public art to commemorate the Marshall Fire, and we're working on that right now. So tonight I'm going to ask you for 2 things. I'm going to ask you for more money. I want our budget, I want it increased. I don't want it to stay the same. If it stays the same, we will not do what we did this year. Prices are going up, as you're well aware. We will probably be able to host 3 concerts in the park. We've already talked about this as the council, as the cultural council. So we need our budget increased, right? We will have to cut programming if we don't get an increase in our budget. The other thing I'm asking for is I'd like additional support from the council. I'd like somebody to come and sit in on our meetings maybe and see what we do, help guide us, and so be there when we have those questions we want to ask. So again, I want to thank you for your time, thank you for support, and I want to point out that on Councilman Dickinson's laptop, it says, "Be a force for good." Give us more money. Thanks, I appreciate it.
Thank you, JR. Any other public comments? All right. I know Councilor Most has a comment for the budget.
So, thanks, JR. I want to start by recommending, and I know we are in budget crunch mode. I understand that we are facing significant issues going forward. We have a lot of unpredictability because we don't know how much is going to be covered of the fire-related expenses by FEMA and by our insurance. But I want to advocate that we increase the cultural council's budget. My understanding is the budget right now is $15,000, which I'm going to use a strong word here. I think is kind of pathetic for a community our size. And I would like to consider increasing that to $50,000, which is something that I think is reasonable. I think that we have a cultural council, and I've spoken to some of the members individually, communicated with them, that I clearly is motivated to do good work for our community. I think given the trauma of this community between the pandemic and the fire, that these are the kind of events that bring some joy into people's lives, you know, and allows them to go feel good and go do something connected to other people in the community and feel a part of the community. And I also would really like to see the Cultural Council increase the variety and diversity of the events we have. And I would love to see, to be able to support our, are we calling them DEI or EDI? I'm not sure which. I know we had an EDI council, but I think we're calling it DEI now, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, to really think about how to broaden these events to be more inclusive of everyone in our community. And even to the point, a woman had reached out to me the other day who was very interested in, who was impacted by something she read in the newspaper about the increase in teen suicide. And to, you know, try to start to address some of the issues we have in the community and do outreach in lots of ways to lots of folks in our community who are underrepresented, who are marginalized, who are under emotional and psychological stress. And I think that the Cultural Council is a great place to do that, to bring people together and to create events that are educational, that are informational, that are fun, that are joyous. And so, yeah, I would really like to advocate for that. I do have a bunch of other questions about the budget, but I'm happy to wait on those if you'd like, however you want to do that, Dennis.
It's up to you. We have other counselors with comments, but if
Yeah,
you want
I'll just wait and then I'll come back to some of those other questions.
Counselor Dickinson?
Yeah, just on this topic, I actually agree entirely. I think art is incredibly important, and I don't think we have enough of it. And I would pretty much echo everything that Maxine said, and kind of add to that I think this, if we do decide as a council to increase the budget, that I think this is almost condescending to say, but like, you're the Cultural Council, we shouldn't have to say this, I don't think we need to. But that you hear from council how important that DEI topic is, and that we're using this extra budget. And I know you feel like you need it anyway, but it's more than we've had. And I really want to give direction that increased budget, that we're putting a lot of effort into exactly what Councilmember Mo said, is increasing the diversity of events that we have and the experience that people get to have, and inviting people into our community and compensating them for doing that. And whether that's physical art or experiential art. And I've had a lot of conversation with people about, you know, a public art gallery. I know we have the art center, but again, an opportunity to, you know, to create and present and to see art in our community. So I think there's a lot of really fun ways to spend that money, but I would hope that a great deal of it is spent in that direction specifically, as well as maintaining the things you guys have been doing so well. So again, I feel like, yeah, you're like, yeah, we get it, we're on it. we're the cultural council, you're city council, we know what we're doing. But yeah, hopefully we're in concert there.
Thank you, Counselor Dickinson. Counselor Fahey?
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to agree with almost everything that's been said. I do believe in the value and the wonderful work that the Cultural Council has done in the arts and theater and all of their efforts. I would really like to see more EDI or DEI issues brought into the cultural events that we provide. My only drawback is the budget. And do we have the money? Because I will say every advisory board and council and commission in the city, and there's like a dozen at least, want something. Some that have been putting things off for 5 years, 7 years, more than that. So that's the problem is, yes, we would love to support you, but we also want to support all of the other groups as well, and we just don't have the money to do it all. So we have to set some kind of priorities. I think the budget that was proposed is pretty good, and we don't know yet what our financial situation is going to be 2 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now. So it makes it really challenging to be increasing budgets. I would like to more propose that we use this as something that could be a budget amendment in either in 2023, 2024, whenever we actually know how much money we're going to have to spend on all these optional things, because I think it's really important to continue to support the things we already have before we start adding more that we then can't support. So.
I'm going to hand it off to you in a second here, Councilor Most, but my comment on this is I tend to agree with Councilor Fahey. I think this is an important thing, but I guess I would like to ask the city manager, if we did do some increase, what would be the choice that we're making? So, it's a matter of us deciding priorities. I'm not asking you to, to answer this right now. But when we go to public hearing or when it comes back to council on the 25th, if we did want to increase it, what do we have to decrease in another area?
I think you stated it well, Mayor Pro Tem, in terms of priorities. If this is a priority for council, we'll figure something out. So would that be my response?
All right. Councilor Most, you had a list of other things.
Other questions about the budget? I was taking copious notes this afternoon. It was so much fun. So the first question I had in general is that just looking at the general fund and looking at our targets for the general fund and looking at how, see if I can bring up the chart so I know what I'm talking about here. Okay. So if we think about where the general fund is, right, we have had sort of, I guess, I don't know if I can read this, since 2018, probably twice sort of what the target has been. We've had about, I guess, a target around maybe less than $5 million, and we've had over $10 million. And I guess what I'm questioning is that target, because the reason that I think we're okay, we have work to do, but I think we're generally okay is because we had a pretty big surplus, 12 million plus at the end of 2021. And my concern is, I don't think these climate disasters are going to stop. I think we have to build in to our budget that we're going to have events like this. I guess we had the flood in 2013, 2014. I just think that I'm a little bit uncomfortable when I look at the trajectory of our, target reserves heading down to $5 million. Are we really comfortable with that as a council in a world where we may have one of these crises every 3 to 5 years? And I hate to talk about that, and I don't like thinking about it, but I think it's a reality. And so I'm just I know that there was a lot of work done about where those reserves should be and what the percentage should be, but I think we may need to revisit that given the world we live in today. Because I'd hate to be, if we had $5 million in our reserves in December, I think we'd be in a much worse position today than we are. So I think that's something we really need to think about as a council, the frequency of what we're expecting. So that's just one comment. The other comment I have is, I did notice in the budget that we were looking at an increase in our insurance rates for about 20% of next year, and then that drops down to like 9, 7, and 7. And again, I'm concerned that given the world we're living in right now, that even if it's not our community that has another disaster, I know that at least in the Front Range, and I think all across Colorado, everybody's property taxes are going, I mean, everybody's homeowner's insurance is going up 20 to 25%. And I see that captured for next year in the city. What I'm worried about is if we have more of these climate crises in our area, is that going to be something that we have to start looking at and expecting a 20% hit every year? And I don't know, but I think it's something we need to think about. The other question, this is a question I have, is when looking at the water use and the water tap and the wastewater fees, they seem to be really erratic in terms of growth, increase and decreases over the years. I'm assuming that is linked to specific development projects. Is that correct? Why those numbers get really big, you know, like the increases are huge and then they drop. Is that what's reflected in there?
Yeah, if you're referring to our rates, it's reflected in our long-term plans and one-time jumps that we may need to do to catch things up.
Okay, so that just represents, okay. And then, okay, that's that one. And then the other questions I have to do with some of the rec center expenses and the targeted plans for purchases. And I guess I think if I had to find $35,000 extra for the Cultural Council, that's where it would come from. I'm not familiar enough with you know, all the details, but for example, they're looking at their replacement equipment. Looks like goes from $75,000 to $100,000 to $125,000 to $152,000 over the next few years. And I'm just wondering, you know, what estimates we're using for lifetime of equipment. There's a budget item in there for replacing all the televisions. I don't know, like in my house, the TV gets replaced when it breaks. I mean, if the TVs are functioning, I'm just wondering, are they anticipating replacement for some of this stuff before it breaks, or are we kind of stretching out? Because one of the things I think you do when you're under a tight budget is you're like, the TV, I've had it 7 years, but it's still working, so let's keep using it. I mean, I don't want to be in a place where we're like in a crisis mode. We need to have, you know, if a TV goes out, we need to be able to get a replacement. But I'm just wondering, do we really, you know, at what point do you really need to upgrade? What added functionality are you getting out of a TV that's running in the rec center if it's still working and the colors are bright enough and all the rest of that stuff? And then what else? There was another, let's see. Oh, and there were some other questions about, like, there's a line item for I think $6,500 to replace folding tables. Do we have folding tables? Do the folding tables work? If they're working, I'm like, I don't understand why. I guess you want to replace things as they fail, but some of these items, a plastic folding table, if it's still functioning, it's not broken, then to me, it's just kind of wasteful, and it's actually really unsustainable to go replace things that are made out of plastic if they're still working. So I would really like to get some more, maybe another pass from the folks at the rec center and really understand, are these really nice to haves, or are these must haves? And I'd like to see a difference between what a must have is on equipment replacement versus, yeah, we have 20 tables, they're kind of old, maybe one's broken, let's replace them all. And there's the same thing on, I think, like seating at the pool, things like that. I get these things wear out and you have to replace them, but just as, again, from a fiscal accountability standpoint and a sustainability standpoint, I'd really like us to be clear about what we actually have to do versus, yeah, we'd like all the same chairs out by the pool, so we're gonna take all this plastic that's still functioning and, you know, dump it into the landfill. That's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor Dickinson.
Thanks. Yeah, on the general fund target balance, I think, you know, we kind of addressed that a couple years ago. Was it a year and a half ago? We changed it, I want to say, from 20% to 30%, or from 15 to 25.
we went 15 to 25, and the calculation's a little different because we include transfers.
Right. So we have made that adjustment recently, maybe not to the level that you'd be comfortable with, but definitely it took us from basically a $3 million target to a $5 million target, which I think is certainly better. It's not 12. And so I'm hopeful. I still think it makes me think that there's another reason for potential like recovery taxes. We want to build a fund, one, to help recover from what just happened, and two, to be fiscally prepared for a catastrophe. I'm also thinking that, it's like when you try to get a school scholarship for your kid, like, but you have money saved in your college fund. You don't need money. Like, oh, we saved up money for a catastrophe, so now the state's not going to jump in and help us as much because we have all the money we need. We saved up for this, which is an interesting dilemma, right? Like you get punished for being prepared. But I think you're right that it would be naive of us if we think we're not going to have another disaster of some kind in the next decade. And so I think that's definitely something to look at. And I'm actually, what I think is really remarkable is that through COVID and the wildfires, we have a budget that looks like we're going to be above our target, not our minimum, but our like, gosh, wouldn't it be great if we had this much in our account in 2028? And it looks like we have a budget that will actually be there through these two major issues and moments. So I think it's, again, Deb says this all the time, but I think it's a credit to the councils before us and the staff before us that we were in such a healthy position that we've been able to weather this as well as we've had. But I think you're right, Maxine, that it could keep happening. I won't go into as the details as much on the on your other topics. I agree that we'd want to spend money prudently, and I hope that each department head and each place is kind of looking at that and being smart and of course budgeting for the TV replacements when they're going to happen, and then doing it thoughtfully and in the right ways. But yeah, I'm really impressed with what you guys have been able to come up with. We joked a few meetings ago, you'll fix this, right? Great, nice work. You fixed it. You did a great job. It is a ton of work. Thank you so much for all of the effort you put into this. I do put a lot of faith in staff that these numbers are dependable. And I think one thing to remember for all of us is that they are painfully conservative. And that's great, like you should be. And my hope is that they're wrong and that things will be rosier than they've painted here. And it would be very easy to just plug in some rosy growth numbers and plug in some, other rosy calculations. So like, yeah, it works. The budget looks great because we were really optimistic. And I actually think we have a very conservative staff. And so I feel really comfortable that this is how we'll look or better, save for a major disaster. I think that given normal and customary things over the next couple of years, I think this is a conservative budget and that we'll do better than this. So I'm happy with it at this point in the process.
Councilor Brown, and then Councilor Lay, and then my turn.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Yeah, I just appreciate the work that has gone into this budget. It's I think it's a strikingly different picture to Councilmember Dickinson's comment than we saw even just a month or two ago. Where our reserve balance was going negative at some point. So this is great. This is great news. I think on the Cultural Council piece, I'm very much in support of increasing the budget for the Cultural Council. I especially am concerned with comments from the Cultural Council members that because of labor costs, that they're contemplating a reduction in service. I certainly wouldn't want the service to be reduced. So I'm hopeful that staff can work with Cultural Council members to make sure that the budget is able to maintain the level of service, the level of events that they've been able to produce at the very bare minimum, and then ideally we would be able to increase those events. I'm mindful of what the Mayor Pro Tem and what Councilmember Fahey have said about our budget, but it is, I think the cultural events are a real important priority for so many members of the community, in particular those concerts in the park on Thursdays. I want to, I was something else I was going to say. I don't remember what it was, so I'm sorry about that. But anyway, thank you for the opportunity.
We will come back to you. Counselor Lay.
Just a couple of things. Thank you to staff for the hard work that you're putting in and continue to put in. I appreciate Councilmember Most's comment about climate disasters. I mean, at some point, things that just seem to happen out of nowhere become predictable, at least in their frequency, and you can sort of establish after a while some level of risk. That said, I actually think the reason why we're in the place we are is that we've had good policies in place. And conservative enough. Now, I don't mean to say that that's not something, you can't rest on your laurels on this, but I do actually believe staff take this stuff into consideration as they're creating their projects, their budgets. They do an awful lot of preparation in the work that they do just to be professionals in having to account for risk. And I think we're very fortunate to have the staff we are. But I do think that's part of what they do. And I think that it's not just a freak of nature that we've ended up in the way that we have. We can always be happy, for example, that we have internet sales and that those taxes are being collected, because that's a huge benefit to all of us. And it probably keeps me from complaining quite as much about Amazon trucks driving around Louisville, because they do collect a lot of that, or help to collect that for us. But, which is one of the reasons I'm sure they collect that tax for us. But I think that's something that's really important. I think in this issue of the Cultural Council's budget, I support that. I think we need to be looking at, those are general fund dollars, so we need to be thinking about, I suppose we can think about capital dollars, but I think it's important to be thinking carefully about how we offset those. And I don't mean to suggest that anybody on council is unaware of that. I think we all are. And I'm going to spend a little bit more time, and I appreciate Councilmember Most's suggestions about the rec center. I don't know that that's the place that I would cut, but I recognize that we have to think about that. We may really need to talk about that before, but the budget, we just can't, pump some numbers up without balancing, because we, unlike other parts of our particularly federal government, we actually have to balance it as a constitutional matter. So anyway, I think that comes, and I think we're early to consider tax. That's a whole other deal about whether there should be increased taxes. I don't know that we need to get into that too deeply right now, but I do think that we have to be careful about increasing one area without decreasing some other place. And, the one thing about this that I think, and, I think different people in council have made this point before, that, and maybe on DEI especially, sometimes the increases, the changes in our behavior as a city are going to mean hard choices. And saying, instead of sort of saying, oh, we can make it up or we can do a budget. It's a matter of saying, this is so important to us. And I think Councilmember Most really made this pitch earlier, that we need, if we have to cut somewhere else and that's worth doing. So, but it doesn't mean we can't. I don't know. My fellow council member, Dickinson is an extraordinarily optimistic guy, and that's one of the things I love about him. I'm not necessarily certain I have the same optimism exactly. I hope he's right. But I think we need to be prudent, that's all. And I'm not saying he's not counseling prudence, he is too. But I think we need to, we'll have to come and revisit these numbers. And I appreciate your keeping us up to speed, because that's what we're asking staff to do, saying, what's our latest and greatest. So thank you for that, and back to the Mayor Pro Tem, I guess.
Thank you, Councilor Lay. I just want to, I noticed somebody has their hand up on Zoom, and just so you know, we're actually beyond the public comment period, and so we're just in the council discussion. But I want to go back to quoting myself and embarrassing the deputy city manager. A couple of meetings ago, we talked about budget, and I said, you got this, or you said, I got this, or we got this, or whatever. So there's a number of things that, going through this process that the staff has done. And, it's really important to recognize that this is a dialogue as we articulate priorities, whatever those might be. We set priorities, and we make tough decisions on budget. And so if we decide to do a program, we might have to decide not to do something else. So that's my theme with the Cultural Council. I support more funding for the Cultural Council. I love the community park concerts. I think all of those things are important, especially when they get into more diversity and more creativity, more forms, and I love all of that. So I support that, but that means that we are going to have to make a decision to not do something else, and that's why we get paid the big bucks and all the glory, as they say. But I think one thing is really important we have in front of us is a balanced budget, and I will never vote for approving a budget unless it's a balanced operating budget, and that's constitutionally basically what we're supposed to do. But I'm going to keep saying it like a broken record. The one thing I am less optimistic on than some of my fellow colleagues, looking at that general fund chart on page 92 of our packet, it does show that we are over our target fund balance. But the question that I asked the city manager at the last budget meeting, does this include the gap that we're anticipating for Marshall Fire costs versus what we're anticipating for reimbursement and insurance? And I believe that we're going to be way below the minimum line when we get out to 2028, in my opinion, at this point in time. So I have a very different view because that is not baked into the budget, if I'm correct about that, city manager.
There are some capital projects that are not in the budget, as far as like Dillon Road, you talk about McCaslin, projects of that scope are not in the budget. All the fire recovery projects are, and we're still working through what our anticipated reimbursements from insurance and FEMA will be, and what that gap will be left with looks like.
Right.
It's not going to be small.
Right. So, there is some significance to that we're going to have to be aware of. And I think it's a different view than the chart that we're looking at, because we really don't know. We don't have that certainty. And I understand where we're at. It's like we can't create a chart based upon guesses. But I think we have to recognize there's some significant things that are not there that may or may not be funded. And, we won't know that until we redone those and asked for reimbursement. But I'm the other side of Councilor Dickinson. I tend to be more pessimistic, and he gets to be optimistic. So it's somewhere in between the two of us, I suppose. But, the idea of, I don't know what you call a rainy day fund, emergency fund, whatever. If you just look at the same chart and you look at where things have bounced down, I've been on council when we were just recovering from the flood. And there's some significant things in our funding over this period of time. The ARPA funding is included in this, and that's not an ongoing revenue source. you know, that was something that was a point in time to help us recover from the effects of COVID. That's in here. So that you can't say there's a linear line of revenue over time because, you know, unless that occurs every 3, 4, 5 years. So, you know, I tend to be more conservative and really look at the operational revenues and expenses. When these things come, they're intended for a investment purpose, and, you know, I think we have plenty of opportunities there. The other thing is the sales tax projection, and I hope when we get to the, what's the date here, the October 25th meeting, that you will have at least through, that would be through, I don't know if you will have through the third quarter, but we should be pretty close on the third quarter for the sales tax, so we should have a much better anticipation because we raised that at one point in time based upon what we saw from the beginning of the year. And now we're seeing that tail off. So it may be 10 or 12%, which is lower than what we raised it to. That's another point of caution on that as well. And then you know, it's interesting because I had written down the rec center R&R as well, and you know, I think that's something that that renewal and replacement schedule is something maybe if you could articulate a little bit more on that. You know, I don't know about the chairs or the tables, but I do know in the, you know, the equipment, for example, they're looking at how many hours of usage and so forth. And you know, I think if City Manager Durbin, if you could just give a not a long but a brief narrative of conceptually how that's done, so that we understand choices we might make around that, and what kind of, you know, data points it's built upon. But the other thing, I mean, as far as the reserves, I mean, I think we're all curious about what reserves should be. And, you know, I think that's something that we should put on the work plan for 2023, and we should charge the Finance Committee with taking a look at that. And so that, you know, as a policy decision. The thing I agree with Councilor Dickinson on, so great, now how do we fund it? If we think it's important as a city, do we start taking that out of, you know, capital? We take it out of general fund? Do we have a new tax to fund that? I think that will be part of what we'll need to ask the Finance Committee to do over the course of the next year. You know, but all in all, I think I really appreciate the work. Thank you, Deputy City Manager, for the work you did on this. And I've got this slogan. I really like that. But what we have in front of us is very clear. And I think that, you know, that's a tribute to everybody in the city who's worked on this. So I want to thank everybody. And, you know, one of the things came up, Director Coher, was the tap fees. At some point in time, we probably need a little tutorial on tap fees and how they get calculated, because that's a mystery to most of us. And, you know, it's going forward. We know that there are some cities that ours a lot less and ours, you know, whatever. And so when the opportunity arises at some point in time when we start talking about utilities and stuff, I would ask you to spend some time helping us understand that particular thing. But with that, I don't really have any substantial changes to the budget other than, you know, taking a look at what kind of increase for the Cultural Council makes sense and what choices we're making. Councilor Lay, comments?
I wanted to address one thing that I'd forgotten before, because I think Councilmember Most, I'm singing a lot of praises of you tonight, Councilmember Most. You've hit on a lot of really good points. But the point that you made about insurance, I think is important. You know, we have a position now, staffed by a very trusted member of the staff, and I don't exactly know what the title is, whether it's Director of Risk Management or Risk Management.
Specialist, yeah, I was gonna, risk management specialist.
Excellent.
Don
Sorry.
Burgess.
I should have known that before I mentioned it. But I think it's worth, because we've already had one recent example concerning some coverage on some litigation that we have. that we, that we evaluate those policies carefully. I'm sure that that's going to get done, but devoting the resources to it, I'm really glad we're doing that. And I think, managing the risk is all of our responsibilities in a different way, the directors and person in that position and council too. But, wherever we can find ways to manage risk through insurance, obviously I know we're going to be looking for opportunities to do that too. And I don't know whether you want to address that, city manager, at all, but I think she raises a good point when she raises it.
Only to agree with you, and we'll have an opportunity to debrief how our policy really played out as relates to the fire. So a good learning opportunity there, and then you always shop the market too, just like you do for your auto and homeowners insurance too. So yes, thank you.
Thanks to Councilor Lay. Councilor Fahey?
Thank you. Yes, I have a question for staff, and it's about staff. I know that there's been a lot of fluctuation, and we've added staff for the planning department because of the fire. We're talking about, at least talking about hiring a DEI person. So I'm wondering when those people will be hired. I know planning is already hired too, right? And how is this fluctuation in staffing affecting the budget? Because we're paying extra to have these new staff people, but are there also staff members who are leaving that we're not, what's the situation like?
Yes, good question. With we've got a fair amount of transition, and transition is going to be a theme here for us for a little bit. We've got a finance director recruitment ongoing right now. We had to push that back out again. We are currently also recruiting for the economic vitality manager position. So we're doing both those overlapping now. The next one is whether it's EDI or DEI, I can't even remember now, but that's the next one on the list. I'm just trying to manage bringing all these people on at the same time versus trying to stagger those. And as far as I think you're asking about, are there staff savings? Because of vacancies that helps this budget, I can't speak to that specifically unless you can, but I imagine that there are.
Yeah, so it's a good question. We always have some built-in savings, whether it's a gap between when we hire someone, when we lose somebody and then we hire someone. So that's always something that's kind of a factor that's at play in our budget on a sort of a dynamic basis. So we haven't really built in that we anticipate this percentage of those savings, but that is something that's kind of constantly fluctuating. What we have accounted for is we account for the cost of the positions essentially, and then any revenue that would be associated specifically for that. So for example, the positions that we've talked about in planning and building, we do have the permit fees, which are offsetting those costs associated with hiring those new staff. So that's all accounted for as well.
But we don't have all of that permit fee coming in from the fire rebuilds to cover.
We have the permit fees, but we do not have the use tax revenue. So those are two separate revenue sources.
Okay, but isn't the permit fee for rebuilds on the fire reduced from the full price?
No.
No, really? Okay. Thank you very much.
One thing I would mention on that is we have a thing we call turnback. I don't know if you remember that term. The finance director probably can explain it much better than me, but we actually calculate a percent of the general fund budgets that we expect to be turned back or not spent, if you will, because we appropriate a certain amount, but we know that there may be open positions or not all the supplies are spent or whatever, and so that's actually calculated as part of the budget. So we're anticipating a certain percent of that, so you bet. I have to give the finance director all the credit for that. So any other comments on this? All right, so city manager, I think the only items, we only had a couple of items. One was the Cultural Council increase. If you could give us some idea of increases and the priority on that. A little more explanation on the rec center renewal and replacement. And you know, one of the things that we use for pavement replacement, I think you call it PCI, right? And it's actually it's an indicator, so it's a data point. And I guess what we're looking for is some ideas on data points that the rec center is using when they do replacement to help us understand that. And then the last action item, I guess, we need to put on the list for discussion for the 2023 work plan for the Finance Committee is talking about reserves. Were there any other items that got brought up that we need to make note of? Yes, Councilor Dickinson?
This hasn't been brought up, but it's been something that has, I've been thinking about a lot. Kurt, I'd really appreciate just before we're done with this process, kind of an update from you about, how you're tweaking or maneuvering the pavement plan based on, the roads that maybe are going to get damaged ahead of when we were planning. I'm sure you've been doing an amazing amount of work on thinking about changing the order of roads you're dealing with to kind of time it better with roads that might have to be replaced earlier than not. And it's just something that you're kind of doing behind the scenes. And I'd love to hear just kind of what you've been doing, what you're thinking, and how you're trying to maneuver those projects, just as an informational piece, not to affect the budget, but just to understand what your strategy is would be a fantastic piece to learn.
Do what you need. Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm sorry, I have a family emergency that I need to take care of, so I'm going to excuse myself for the remainder of the evening. I just wanted to add that I wanted to make sure that the mayor's drone project had made it in. Okay, thank you. And I apologize.
Thank you, Councilor Brown. Any last comments on this? Yes, questions?
Looking over my list, I think I would just add one more item. That's the sales tax projections.
Thank you. All right, I think that, did you have something? All right, I think that, anybody else? All right, I think that wraps up this discussion. So you have action items. We look forward to further discussion on this, and I just want to thank all the staff for the work thus far on the budget. All right, we're going to move on to item E, which is the executive session. And I'm going to introduce Assistant City Attorney Melinda Cully, who will kick us off here.
As noted on the meeting agenda, the city manager is requesting an executive session for the purpose of consultation with an attorney representing the city with respect to pending litigation pursuant to Section 5(2)D of the city's Home Rule Charter and CRS Section 24.6.4024B. And the Mayor Pro Tem is requesting an executive session for the purpose of discussion of annual performance evaluations of the city attorney, water attorney, municipal judge, and prosecuting attorney pursuant to Section 5(2)B of the city's Home Rule Charter and CRS Section 24.6.4024F. Prior to entertaining any motion, the city clerk will read a statement required by the city code.
Thank you. It is the policy of the city to conduct public business and meetings open to the public. While in executive session, it is inappropriate to take straw votes, keep minutes, or to make any final decisions. It is the duty of each council member to ensure executive sessions are conducted in strict compliance with this ordinance, state and federal law, and any applicable provisions of the state and federal constitutions. If at any time the scope, nature, or parameter of this executive session goes beyond the publicly stated topic, it is the responsibility of the City Council to terminate and cease any further deliberation within the executive session and return to the public meeting. Only those topics described in City Ordinance may be discussed in an executive session. Those topics are as follows: where federal or state law requires the information being discussed to remain confidential, certain personnel matters involving only employees directly appointed by the City Council and other personnel matters upon request of the city manager or mayor, consideration of water rights and real property acquisitions and dispositions, but only as to appraisals, value estimates, and strategy, and legal consultation with an attorney representing the city with respect to pending litigation.
Regarding the authority for the executive session, Section 52D authorizes an executive session for the purpose of discussing pending litigation, and Section 52B of the Home Rule Charter authorizes an executive session for the purpose of discussing a personnel matter involving officials directly appointed by the council. An executive session for these purposes is also authorized by the Open Meetings Law, Section 24.6, 4024B, and 4024F of the Colorado Revised Statutes. The request involves discussion of two separate topics. One, discussion with attorneys representing the city in the case recently filed in federal district court challenging aspects of Ordinance Number 1831, Series 2022, captioned Rocky Mountain Gun Owners et al. Versus the City of Louisville. And two, evaluations of the city attorney, water attorney, municipal judge, and prosecuting attorney, who are all employees directly appointed by the city council. With that, you can entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion. I move to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing pending litigation and a personnel matter involving employees directly appointed by the city council, and that the executive session also include City Manager Jeff Durbin, Deputy City Manager Megan Davis, Attorney Gordon Vaughn, who will join the executive session by Zoom, and Assistant City Attorney Melinda Cully, except that Ms. Cully will leave the executive session when City Council discusses the city attorney evaluation. The question I have, City Clerk, is do we have to note the city councilors who will be in attendance? No, okay, thank you. So can we have a roll call and a vote, please?
Second. Do we get seconded?
You seconded.
Yeah.
Councilmember Most,
Yes.
Councilmember Lay,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney,
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey,
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson.
Yeah. I don't know what just happened.
Okay, the city council will now adjourn to executive session. Wait.
Good, right? It's boring at times.
It is incredibly boring.
It's kind of tedious, but anyway, I think generally leaving the mayor out of it, it's something, you know.
Well, often, actually,
Never.
I know, but Ashley's depth of knowledge of certain things is like ridiculous.
Yeah, but you know what? nobody else's is. Nobody on the council sometimes, and nobody in the, so you're just as entitled to ask your questions as anybody else.
Sometimes I just feel that way. You know, sometimes I feel like I know what I'm talking about. And when I feel like I know what I'm talking about, like I can talk about anything forever.
Yeah. Yep. Um, what is today, the 3rd? I have nothing.
Thank you.
Very welcome. Thank you for your comments on the family. Because we'll be dealing with that in the not too distant future, and you took obviously a lot of time to think about it. Appreciate it.
You'll do it, yep. Mayor Pro Tem and Council, as noted on the meeting agenda, the executive session was for the purpose of discussing pending litigation, a personnel matter involving employees directly appointed by the city council, specifically the city attorney, municipal judge, prosecuting attorney, and water attorney, and the city council has had such discussion. That's it.
That wraps that up. City Attorney's report.
Nothing extra to report tonight.
Thank you very much for being here. Council comments, committee reports, and identification of future agenda items. Councilor Dickinson, then Councilor Most.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you guys in on some of the one-year commemoration of the fire. You know, it was very clear that this shouldn't be a city-run, political-run thing. We've heard that loud and clear from a lot of disaster survivors, that it needs to be community-led. And so I just want you guys to know that Marshall Together, Marshall Rock, Superior Rising, Louisville Rising, Precious Child, Ascent Church, Vista Hospital, lots of individual residents are working on lots of things from really November to January that are very much fire survivor driven. And the good news is that the city has been incredibly generous with time and resources and facilities and things like that as they're planning different events and different things they want to do. And so the city of Superior, City of Louisville, and Boulder County have all been really, really supportive of the resident efforts to do some really nice events through that time. And I won't get into all the different events, but there really are like 5, 6, 7, 8 different little to big things for really committed to, like, for the fire survivors, not necessarily for the whole community, but for them. And that's what they were really focusing on, that they need things. And it's not so much, which is hard for people like me, it's not so much about like us being with them, if you will, us being, you know, less affected, but really about supporting them in this really triggering month. And so I think there's going to be some really wonderful events, and there'll be lots of announcements about all those events as they get finalized. But just wanted to give you guys an update on that.
Thank you, Councilor Dickinson. Councilor Most.
Well, at least it's good that we've been getting rain and it's not super dry this year. So I hope that's making people feel a little better when they walk around. I just wanted to, based on what we heard from the EDI folks, to ask for a future agenda item to get an update from the city manager on the EDI.
And before Councilor Brown left, he was making the same suggestion. So I think we would all appreciate just an update there. Anything, Councilor Lay?
Yeah, geez, I'm just riffing off things that Councilmember Most is saying.
All night tonight.
Yeah. I sent a note off to he who spoke earlier about boards and commissions. And we have in the past, and I presume this year we are doing some things to be more encouraging of diversity, but I don't pretend that we're doing enough or the right things. And I suggested, if she has any thoughts, that we're all ears, and staff is all ears about how to do that better, as well as trying to do better on the equity and inclusion piece, which are different. If we need, for example, to have some interviews at a different time for some of the candidates, we should do that. If we need to have some sort of translation support or whatever it may be, that we do that. But and I'm happy. I'll forward you the email. I'll forward everybody the email just so you know what I said. But if there's something that could be done to perhaps, and I hate to put the people who are on the task force to more work, but if they have some suggestions, it's a good time, because there's now, we have more than a month, and there's time to get announcements out or to enlist support or help or whatever. So I was really, really pleased that they came tonight. And, you know, a lot of people have been very patient with us on that issue and others in the city. But it's time to roll up our sleeves a little more and do some work. So I appreciate that. And I look forward to your update, City Manager.
Thank you, Councilor Lay. Any last comments? All right, with that, we're adjourned.
Recording stopped.